What if the person you've always been compared to, the one who shines brightest in every room, has no idea who you are? I leaned against the kitchen counter, fingers curled around a cold soda can, the fizz hissing softly as my brother Damian held court in our family's suburban living room. Easter decorations, pastel flowers, and ceramic bunnies cluttered the space, but the air felt heavy, charged with something sharper than holiday cheer. At 32, I'd grown used to fading into the background at these gatherings, but tonight, Damian's gaze found me, and I knew what was coming. His words, sharp as a blade, were about to cut deeper than ever, and I wondered if he'd ever suspect the secret I carried, a truth so vast it could unravel his entire world. The living room buzzed with relatives, their laughter bouncing off the walls as Damian, mid-30s and polished in a tailored blazer, described his latest prize, an $80,000 Tesla, sleek and gleaming in his driveway 3 miles away. "It's the future," he said, voice loud enough to drown out the clinking of wine glasses. His eyes flicked to me, a smug glint in them. "Still renting, Evelyn? At your age, throwing money at landlords?" The room erupted in chuckles, aunts and cousins glancing my way with pity or amusement. My chest tightened, a familiar ache blooming beneath my ribs. I forced a smile, lips pressed thin, and took a sip of soda, the cold bubbles sharp against my tongue. In our family, success was a performance, and Damian was the star, always had been. I was the quiet one, the renter, the disappointment. I clutched the can tighter, its aluminum denting slightly under my grip, and let the moment pass. Damian wasn't done. As the chatter resumed, he sauntered closer, leaning against the counter with that infuriating grin. "You really should do better, sis," he said, loud enough for me alone, his breath tinged with the Merlot he'd been sipping. "The family's embarrassed by you." My jaw clenched, a tremor of anger mixing with hurt. I wanted to snap back, to tell him he had no idea what I'd built, but I swallowed the words. "What do you mean?" I asked, voice steady despite the heat rising in my cheeks. He rolled his eyes. "That cramped 800-square-foot apartment? You own nothing. Grandpa left me everything, and I made something of it. You're stuck playing small." He flicked imaginary dust off his $500 blazer, dismissing me. My nails bit into my palms, but I kept my face calm, a mask I'd perfected over the years. I grabbed my coat from the rack, nodded politely, and slipped out, the April air cool against my burning skin. Enough was enough. I drove the 10 miles back to my apartment in silence, the city lights blurring through my windshield like scattered stars. My heart pounded. Damian's words echoing, embarrassed, nothing, small. Yet beneath the sting, something stirred. Determination, hard and unyielding. I pulled into the parking garage of my high-rise, the lobby's marble floor gleaming under soft lights. Upon the 10th floor, I unlocked my door and flicked on a switch, the room bathing in a warm glow. My apartment was modest, yes, but deliberate. A custom-made walnut table, a $5,000 painting by a rising Chicago artist, each piece chosen for quality over flash. I set my purse on the counter, the leather soft against my fingers, and opened my sleek silver laptop. A spreadsheet loaded, rows of figures scrolling by, properties in Denver, vineyards in California, assets worth $10 million. My eyes scanned the numbers, confirming everything was in order. I closed the laptop with a firm click, my pulse steadying. Let Damian mock me for renting. Let them all think what they want. They had no idea what I truly owned, and for now, that was my power. I stood in the quiet, the city's hum faint beyond my windows, and felt a resolve settle deep in my bones. This was only the beginning. How does a child learn to thrive in someone else's shadow? As I stood in my apartment's quiet, the city's pulse faint beyond the glass, I closed my eyes, and memories flickered like old film reels. At 32, I carried the weight of a childhood where I was always second, my brother Damian, the golden child who soaked up every spotlight. Those early years, etched in my bones, weren't just scars. They were the forge that shaped my silent ambition, the spark that lit a fire no one saw coming. I was 8, Damian 10, in our suburban Ohio home, its beige walls lined with family photos that seemed to feature only him. He stood in a $200 suit, tie knotted by Mom, while I lingered in second-hand jeans, clutching a worn library book. "Look at our little man," Dad said, polishing Damian's dress shoes until they gleamed. I hovered by the staircase hoping for a glance, but their eyes stayed on him, his grades, his charm, his potential. "Stay out of the way, Evelyn," Mom murmured, her voice soft but firm. I nodded, retreating to my room where I traced the book's pages, promising myself I'd build something they couldn't ignore. Each slight, each overlooked moment taught me to be quiet, to save my energy for a future I could control. Years later, when Grandpa died, the ground shifted beneath us. I was 20, sitting in a lawyer's office in Cleveland, the air thick with the scent of old paper. The will was read. Damian, at 22, inherited properties, stocks, and a $2 million trust fund. I got nothing, not a trinket, not a note. Damian's smirk cut deeper than the words, his feigned solemnity a thin veil. I didn't cry, though my throat burned. Outside in the parking lot, I stared at the gray sky, the weight of exclusion heavy but clarifying. I wouldn't beg for scraps. I'd make my way, and it would be bigger than their handouts. That resolve carried me through my 20s. I lived in a $500 a month studio, its walls thin enough to hear neighbors' arguments, and worked nights at a diner, the grease clinging to my skin. By day, I haunted libraries, devouring books on finance, real estate, anything to outsmart the system. My first move was a $100,000 fixer-upper in a Columbus neighborhood poised for growth. I scraped together a down payment, renovated it with borrowed tools, and sold it for a $30,000 profit. Then another and another, each deal sharper, each dollar saved. I studied market trends, memorized zoning laws, and built a portfolio in the shadows. No one knew, not Mom, not Damian, not the relatives who still asked, "When are you going to settle down, Evelyn?" I'd smile, say soon, and keep moving. And those years of hustle weren't glamorous, but they were mine. Each small victory, a signed deed, a bank balance ticking upward, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I learned to be patient, to let my work speak when the time was right. As I opened my eyes in my apartment, the past faded, but its lessons lingered. The fire from those slights, that will, those lonely nights, still burned. I wasn't done proving them wrong, not by a long shot. What does it feel like to be erased by the people who should know you best? As I stood in the quiet of my apartment, the echo of my past victories still warming my chest, a new storm was brewing. The fire I'd kindled in those lonely years of hustle was mine alone. But now Damian's voice, sharp, relentless, was weaving a narrative that painted me as a failure. At 32, I'd learned to shrug off his taunts, but when my phone began to hum with messages from cousins and aunts, their pity slicing through the screen, I felt the walls of my world closing in. This wasn't just a sibling spat anymore. It was a campaign to bury me. It started subtly, a week after Easter, with a text from my cousin Lena in Pittsburgh. "Evelyn, you okay? Heard you're in debt." I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the reply. Debt? The idea was laughable. My portfolio spanned 8 states, $10 million in assets. But the rumor stung. Then came a call from Aunt Marie, her voice dripping with concern. "Damian says you're struggling, honey. Renting because you can't afford a house?" I gripped the phone, the plastic creaking. "I'm fine," I said. My tone clipped and hung up before her questions could dig deeper. Each message, each call, was a pinprick, a reminder of how easily my family swallowed Damian's lies. He told them I owed $50,000, that I was dodging creditors, even hinting I was tangled in something shady. In our family, gossip stuck like tar, and my silence only fueled it. The worst came from Mom. I was slicing apples in my kitchen, the knife's rhythm steadying my nerves, when her call broke the quiet. "Evelyn, you need to clear things up," she said, her voice tight with disappointment. "Damian says you're in trouble. Why can't you just be honest?" The apple's flesh gleamed under the blade, and I paused, my pulse thudding in my ears. Honest? She'd never asked about my life, never noticed the deals I'd closed or the libraries I'd funded. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, each word a stone. She sighed, a sound I knew too well. Damian was the star, and I was the shadow, always to blame. I ended the call. The the silence heavier than before. My kitchen, with its polished granite and faint scent of cinnamon, felt like a fortress, but even here, their judgment seeped in. I sat on my couch, the leather cool against my skin, and let the rumors swirl in my mind. Damian's stories weren't just cruel, they were strategic, a way to keep me small while he shone. I remembered Mom's voice from childhood, always praising him first, and how I'd learned to bottle my hurt. Now, at 32, that hurt was a spark, igniting a resolve to stay above their game. I wouldn't defend myself to people who'd never seen me. Let them whisper about my supposed $50,000 debt, my failure to buy a home. My truth didn't need their approval. I glanced at the city skyline beyond my window, its lights steady and unyielding, and felt my isolation sharpen into strength. Damian could rally the family against me, but I'd already built a world they couldn't touch. This was their loss, not mine, and I'd prove it, not with words, but with what came next. How do you reclaim a story that's been twisted against you? After weeks of dodging my family's whispers, their pitying texts painting me as a broke dreamer, I felt a quiet fire steadying my core. At 32, I'd built a world beyond their reach, and Damian's rumors only sharpened my focus. My kitchen, still fragrant with the apples I'd sliced during Mom's call, was no longer just a refuge. It was a command center. As May's light spilled through my windows, I knew it was time to act, to let my moves speak louder than their lies. The first hint of that shift came with an envelope, its wax seal gleaming, and a drive that would rewrite my past. One evening, my buzzer rang, sharp and unexpected. The camera feed showed Damian, his polished loafers tapping impatiently. I opened the door and he strode in, his gaze sweeping my living room like a critic sizing up a stage. "Nice place," he said, sarcasm dripping, though his eyes lingered on the walnut bookshelf I'd commissioned for $2,000. He spotted a cream envelope on my counter, its gold lettering catching the light. "What's this?" he asked, snatching it up. "A gala? You?" The invitation congratulated me on a $100,000 donation to fund community libraries, an award I'd nearly declined to avoid attention. His laugh was sharp, like glass cracking. "Who'd you scam for that, Evelyn?" My pulse quickened, but I shrugged, voice cool as marble. "Some event for donors." He smirked, tossing the envelope down. "Doesn't matter anyway." I met his gaze, steady and unyielding, and saw a flicker of confusion, maybe even jealousy. "It's not your business," I said, and for once he didn't push. He left with a curt nod, but that moment marked a shift. I wouldn't explain myself, not yet. My actions would do the talking. Days later, I drove 20 miles to our old suburban neighborhood, the streets familiar yet strange, like a half-remembered dream. The trees were taller, their leaves brushing the sky, but the sidewalks bore cracks I knew by heart. I parked outside our childhood home, a tired two-story with peeling paint and a for sale sign staked in the 0.5-acre lawn. Memories flooded back, Dad mowing the grass, his laughter reserved for Damian, me hiding in my room, sketching plans for a future they couldn't see. The house had been my cage, a place where I'd felt invisible, but now it called to me. I stood on the lawn, the grass damp under my sneakers, and dialed the number on the sign. "I'd like to make an offer," I said to the agent, my voice calm. "Full cash, $400,000 through a holding company." The deal closed in days, no fanfare, just a signature on a dotted line. I'd reclaimed the setting of so many hurts, not to live in it, but to own it, to rewrite its story as mine. As I drove back, the rearview mirror framed the house shrinking into the distance, its dusty windows glinting in the sun. My chest felt lighter, as if I'd shed a weight I hadn't named. The gala invitation still sat on my counter, a quiet testament to my impact, and now this house, a symbol of my past, belonged to me. Damian could spread his lies, Mom could echo them, but I was done being their shadow. My moves were deliberate, each one a brick in the empire I'd built without their applause. The city skyline loomed ahead, its steel and glass a mirror to my resolve. I gripped the steering wheel, the leather warm under my palms, and knew the next steps would shake their world. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving their judgment, I was rewriting the rules. What happens when the truth you've held close finally cracks open? After reclaiming my childhood home, it's a quiet victory in my hands. I felt the ground shift beneath me. At 32, I'd carved my path through years of silence. But Damian's lies, his rumors of my failure, still lingered like smoke. The $400,000 house and the gala award were my anchors, proof of a life he couldn't fathom. Yet, as June's heat pressed against my city, a reckoning loomed. My phone's chime, sharp and insistent, pulled me into a storm I hadn't foreseen, one that would strip Damian bare and force our truths into the light. The first ripples came through my finance consultancy, whispers from colleagues about Damian's latest venture, a high-end complex 15 miles outside downtown. Word was it was crumbling. Zoning laws blocked construction, environmental lawsuits piled up, and investors were bailing. I sat at my desk, the air conditioning humming, and read an email from a partner. Damian had borrowed $300,000 to keep up appearances, buying his wife a diamond necklace that glittered on her Instagram. His parties, his $100,000 sports car, his first-class flights, they were a facade, a tightrope fraying under his weight. I traced the edge of my coffee mug, its ceramic cool, and felt a strange pang. He was my brother, but his pride was a wildfire, burning everything it touched. I pushed the thought aside, focusing on my work, deals in Seattle, a vineyard expansion, but the rumors kept circling, a vulture's shadow over his empire. Then came the call that changed everything. My property manager, her voice crisp over the line, asked if I was aware of a delinquent account. "The estate in the suburbs, ma'am," she said. "Payments are 3 months behind." My breath caught. Years ago, I'd bought a cluster of luxury homes through a trust, a $5 million portfolio I rarely thought about, leaving management to her team. Now she confirmed the address. Damian's $2 million mansion, his pride and joy, was mine. He'd been paying rent to my trust, oblivious. I stared out my window, the skyline jagged against a pink dusk, and felt my heart thump. "No special treatment," I said, voice steady. "Follow standard procedure." Hanging up, I gripped the phone, a mix of justice and guilt swirling in my chest. Damian had mocked me for renting, but he was the tenant, and now the truth would hit him like a freight train. He came to me days later, a hurricane in a $1,000 suit. My buzzer rang, and I opened the door to find him red-faced, papers crumpled in his fist. "Is this a joke?" he roared, shoving the documents at me. "You own my house? My entire estate?" I stepped back, letting him storm into my living room, his cologne sharp in the air. The papers listed my trust as the landlord, a fact he'd uncovered through a desperate call to the bank. "I'm not sure what you're talking about," I said evenly, folding my arms. He shook, fury and disbelief warring in his eyes. "You lied, Evelyn. You pretended to be broke, renting." I cut him off, voice like steel. "I never pretended. You assumed." He threw the papers onto my coffee table, the glass rattling. "So what now? You'll evict me?" His sarcasm masked fear, and I saw it, the crack in his armor. My lips curved into a grim smile. "I haven't decided yet," I said softly. He glared, chest heaving, and for once he had no retort. The air crackled, our roles reversed in a single breath. The fallout came fast. Mom called the next day, her voice quivering over the phone. "How could you do this to Damian?" she demanded. "He's your brother." I pressed the receiver to my ear, my kitchen's granite cold under my elbow. "What did he tell you?" I asked. "That you're ruining him," she snapped. "You made him borrow money he couldn't repay." My teeth clenched. Damian had spun the story again, painting me as the villain. "He borrowed that $300,000 himself, Mom," I said, voice trembling. "I had nothing to do with it." She huffed, unconvinced. "You're always trying to make him look bad, Evelyn." I hung up, the silence deafening. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent to my family's betrayal. I'd won, but the victory tasted bitter. Damian's world was collapsing, and I stood at its edge, holding the truth that could break or remake us both. What does freedom taste like after years of carrying others' lies? The truth had shattered Damian's world. My ownership of his $2 million mansion laid bare, his accusations crumbling under my calm resolve. At 32, I'd stood firm as Mom's blame echoed his, but their words no longer bound me. In July, I boarded a plane to Italy, seeking air untainted by family drama. As the ocean stretched below, I felt the weight of their judgment lift, replaced by a quiet certainty. My empire, built in the shadows, was mine to savor, and Damian's fall, though painful, was his to face. Yet a question lingered. Could a single crack in his pride open a door to something new? I landed in a sun-kissed villa 50 miles from Florence, its stone terrace overlooking rows of grapevines that shimmered under a golden haze. This was Evelyn Estates, established in 2009, a $3 million vineyard I'd nurtured discreetly. I walked the paths, soil rich beneath my sandals, and spoke with workers who knew me as the investor who paid fairly. One afternoon, I visited a museum I was funding, its $200,000 renovation, preserving local artifacts. The architect's warm handshake grounded me. Here, my work mattered without fanfare. Standing among dusty relics, I felt untethered from Mom's accusations, Damian's sneers. The vines, the museum, they were my truth, not a stage for applause. Under Italy's wide sky, I breathed deeply, the air sweet with possibility, and knew I'd built a life that needed no one's nod. Back in the States, Damian's collapse unfolded like a slow-motion crash. I caught sight of him one morning in a Cleveland cafe, 10 miles from my city, hunched over a laptop, his $1,000 suits traded for a wrinkled polo. His eyes were puffy, his posture broken, jobless, his wife gone, her Instagram now bare of diamonds. Gossip reached me. His firm had sacked him for diverting $500,000 in client funds, and lawsuits loomed. He'd been evicted, and the mansion's locks had been changed. I slipped out before he saw me, a pang of guilt tugging at my chest. He was my brother, but his choices, pride over humility, had carved this path. I let the moment pass, the cafe's coffee scent fading as I walked away. The family dinner came weeks later, at Mom's cramped suburban house, its air thick with nostalgia and tension. I arrived, the table set with her old china, but Damian stumbled in late, red-eyed, trembling. He pointed at me, voice shaking. "You betrayed me, Evelyn. You destroyed my life." Relatives gasped, forks pausing midair. Mom's eyes welled, torn between us. I set my napkin down, heart pounding but voice steady. "You did that yourself, Damian. You stole from your firm, defaulted on your lease." He slammed the table, silverware clattering. "You're jealous!" I stood, refusing his trap. "I'm done," I said, and left, the door's click final. The night air cooled my skin, and I drove away, head high, no longer their scapegoat. Then a letter arrived, its envelope scrawled with Damian's handwriting. "Evelyn, I didn't see you. I'm sorry," it read, simple and shaky. My breath caught, tears pricking unexpectedly. A second letter followed, asking to meet, no excuses, just a plea. I sat at my desk, the city's hum soft beyond my window, and read it again, searching for hidden motives. It felt genuine, a crack in his armor. I tucked it away, heart heavy with years of hurt, but stirred by hope. Months later, I texted him, "Coffee, next week." Not to erase the past, but to test if healing was possible. My phone buzzed. A $50,000 profit from my French orchard, another thread in my quiet empire. I smiled, the skyline glittering beyond my glass. Damian faced his crossroads. I'd chosen mine. For now, I live fully. My roots deep. My story enough. At 32, I, Evelyn, learned that true strength blooms in silence, not in the clamor of others' approval. Damian's fall, his $2 million mansion revealed as mine, taught me that pride blinds, but resilience sees clearly. Each rumor he spread, each family slight, pushed me to build my $10 million empire without their gaze. In Italy's vineyards, I found peace, my roots deeper than their judgments. His apology, a fragile seed, showed me that forgiveness doesn't erase pain, but can lighten it. I learned to live for myself. My quiet triumphs enough, no matter who sees them.